Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Gender Decoded, where we dive into the numbers behind the norms and the data behind desire. I'm your host, and today we're taking a close look at something that often sparks curiosity, debates, awkward conversations, and even a few raised eyebrows: hookup culture. Whether you're casually curious, academically intrigued, or somewhere in between, this is the episode for you.
Welcome to Gender Decoded, where numbers align, seeing the stories that data defines, breaking the barriers, truth untold, insights in gender, the data falls.
So, what's on the agenda today? We're going to break down the concept of hookup culture, not just what it is, but how common it really is, what motivates it, who participates, how people feel about it, and yes, where it happens most. We'll look at differences between men and women, dive into college campuses, touch on alcohol and mental health, and explore the modern mix of freedom and fallout that comes with casual sex. It's not all fun and games, but it's not all doom and gloom either. The truth, as always, is messier and more interesting. Let's start by defining what we even mean by hookup. It's one of those ambiguous terms. Sometimes it means sex, sometimes just kissing, sometimes anything in between. For most research purposes, though, it generally refers to sexual encounters between people who are not in a committed relationship. No strings attached. Just two or more people getting together without planning a future together. And this isn't entirely new. Casual sex has existed forever, but the cultural moment we call hookup culture is a relatively recent development. It's where these casual encounters aren't just happening, they're being normalized, talked about, and even expected in some environments. So let's talk numbers, because that's where things get real. A number of major studies have tried to quantify hookup culture, particularly in the US. And a lot of them focus on college campuses, where casual sex is most visible and accessible. Between 53% and 76% of American college students have hooked up at least once. By the time they reach senior year, about 72% of men and women have had at least one hookup. One study even found that the average American has the most hookups at age 27. So how is this data collected? Through national surveys, institutional research from universities, peer-reviewed journal studies, and national health studies ranging from the American Psychological Association to the Journal of Sex Research to the Journal of Adolescent Health. Some studies asked students about behavior from ages 14 up to freshman year. Others tracked hookup frequency, sexual behavior, feelings afterward, even motivations. Most of the data relies on self-reporting, which isn't perfect. But when you see similar patterns across multiple independent studies, you start getting a reliable picture. Let's break down one of those patterns where hookups happen. College campuses are the hotspot. Between 60% and 80% of college students in North America report some kind of hookup experience. About 40% of students have 3 or fewer hookups. 40% have between 4 and 9. And only 20% report 10 or more. Surprisingly, only a third of students in one survey said their last hookup involved full intercourse. Another third reported oral or manual stimulation, and a good chunk reported no sexual activity at all. So despite all the hype, hookups often don't go all the way. Even more interesting, who are students hooking up with? The majority, over 50%, hook up with a friend. Just 8% hook up with a stranger, about 24% with a casual acquaintance, and nearly 14% with an ex. Most of these encounters are one-time events with that specific person. On average, students hook up less than once per semester. Now, hookup culture isn't confined to college. One study found that 15% of 12 to 16-year-olds and over 40% of 17 to 21-year-olds engaged in casual sex within a year, despite being virgins at the start of the study. 70% of sexually active teens reported sex outside of romantic relationships. Let's talk gender differences now. The stereotypes about men being more into casual sex than women, well, the data supports parts of it, but not all. Men report more hookups than women, During their first year of college, 45% of men versus 24% of women had casual sex. Men also report greater comfort with all kinds of sexual behaviors during hookups, especially receiving oral sex and having intercourse. But here's the emotional twist. While men tend to feel more satisfied or proud afterward, women report more mixed or negative feelings, 48% of women versus 26% of men. There's also a difference in regret. One large study found that 72% of men and 78% of women regretted at least one casual encounter. The reasons? Sometimes the sex wasn't gratifying, reported by about a quarter of women and nearly a third of men. Sometimes the attraction wasn't there. About 30% of men said they weren't physically attracted to their partner. For women, it was closer to 11%. Some regretted unprotected sex. Others regretted breaking trust or cheating on a partner. Emotional reasons were big too, like wanting a relationship, ruining a friendship, or feeling guilty for unclear reasons. Let's turn now to what motivates people to hook up in the first place. Physical pleasure tops the list. 89% of students say that's a major reason, but 54% say they do it for emotional reasons too. Interestingly, peer pressure is very low. Only 4% cite it as a driver. So people aren't hooking up because they feel forced. They're doing it because they want to, at least in the moment. That said, what role does alcohol play? A major one. In one study, 64% of first-semester female college students said their hookups involved drinking usually around 3 drinks. Men averaged about 6 drinks. In fact, about a third of students said they probably wouldn't have hooked up or gone as far physically if they hadn't been drinking. That's a big insight into how context shapes behavior. After the hookup, emotions are all over the map. About 35% of students felt regretful or disappointed. 27% felt good or happy. 20% felt satisfied. But there were also students who felt confused, uncomfortable, or even desirable. When you break it down by gender again, only 26% of women had positive reactions, while 50% of men did. Still, it's not all negative. There are real benefits people report. Among women, 71% said they experienced at least one benefit from their most recent hookup. These included sexual pleasure, increased confidence, better understanding of their feelings, or even starting a new relationship. About 29% said there were no benefits at all. But clearly, it's not a one-size-fits-all story. Now let's talk about health, both physical and mental. Physically, there's concern about STIs, but that concern is inconsistent. Many students say they trust their partners too much or assume their communities are low risk. Some didn't worry because they were only engaging in oral sex. But these assumptions don't always match reality. One study showed condom use during hookups was only about 46.6%, and only 25% of students said HIV was even a concern. Mentally, the picture gets heavier. About 62% of students experienced sexual regret. 48% dealt with relationship conflict. 47% had negative emotional reactions. Some students reported anxiety, depression, even psychological distress as a result of their hookup experiences. There were also social consequences: losing friends, emotional shutdown, feeling embarrassed, or struggling with their romantic relationships. In a few cases, there were unwanted pregnancies or STIs. Still, preferences matter. So what do Americans want from a hookup? Turns out it's not just about looks. 69% say they'd only start a no-strings-attached relationship with someone they had chemistry with. 77% say sexual compatibility matters. A majority want to know their partner before sex, and 3 in 4 value good communication. Half care equally about looks and personality, and 2/3 have caught feelings after a hookup. So despite the casual framework, emotional attachment is still very common. Now, let's switch to a unique variation: friends with benefits. It's more than a one-time thing, but less than a committed relationship. About 60% of students reported having one. Most of these relationships involved multiple sexual encounters, and about 56% included various types of sex. These relationships don't always stay the same. Around 26% ended completely. 36% became just friendships again. 28% continued as FWB. And about 10% evolved into full romantic relationships. People in FWB relationships listed benefits like no commitment, sexual access, and trust. The downsides? catching feelings, harming the friendship, or negative emotional fallout. Basically, it's a delicate balance between intimacy and boundaries, and it doesn't always hold. So where's the hookup capital of the US? Rhode Island wins the title of thirstiest state based on Google search volume. Denver, meanwhile, ranks as the top city for hookups. And finally, we circle back to our big question, is hooking up replacing dating? The answer, probably not. The data shows that more people still have sex within relationships than through casual encounters. Monthly, about 25 to 38% of students have sex in relationships, compared to only 7 to 18% in hookups. Most people, especially women, still prefer dating. In fact, 95% of women and 77% of men show at least some preference for traditional dating over hookups. So, what have we learned? Hookup culture is real, it's complex, it's nuanced, and it's shaped by age, gender, alcohol, expectations, and emotions. For some, it's liberating. For others, it's confusing or even painful. But at the core of it all is a very human search for connection, for pleasure, for meaning, even when it's temporary. That's it for today's episode of Gender Decoded. If this made you rethink some assumptions or gave you new insights to consider, then we've done our job. Thanks for spending time with me today. Stay curious, stay thoughtful, and until next time, take care.